You? Oh, I'm just fixing my flap here. Have you ever felt like you lost something inside your own house? You search everywhere, looking in all the rooms, and suddenly you find the thing you were looking for, like your glasses. I always do this. Suddenly that thing is right next to you, and you say, impossible, this wasn't here, because if it was, I would have seen it. And there's even that phrase I'm going to say, if it were a snake, it would have bitten you. Guys, if I tell you that that object you lost, it could be your glasses, it could be a pen, it could be your ass, it was there, see, all the time, but in a parallel dimension. But what if I say more? What if I tell you that it didn't go to another parallel dimension because it wanted to, but rather a thing? Something from a parallel dimension pulled it into another parallel dimension. Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Please watch today's video now. I'm Carol Capel, your favorite parallel. It wasn't good, was it? I'm Carol Capel, your favorite confused, and in today's video I'm going to tell you some evidence, some proof that parallel dimensions exist. And at the end I'm going to tell you something that happened to me and my husband, which was like unexplainable. You decide if you can explain what happened to Dima only at the end, right? Stay until the end to catch this hairy story from our life. It's likely happened to several of my viewers. You just didn't pay attention. Or you paid attention and said, that's weird. Well, I've been giving a lot of messages this month. I have a lot of messages to give to you. The first most important message is we can't lose touch. And let's go, because this channel here that I'm talking to you, it will cease to exist not because I want it, no, but because just like all the other channels that exist on this platform will cease to exist because YouTube is. So I don't want to lose touch with you. So for me not to lose touch with you, it's important that you follow me on other social networks too. Okay, there's my Instagram, Carol Capel Official, which is the one I use the most. There's my Facebook. For those who still use Facebook, it's showing up there too. There's also my Snapchat, why not? Caroline Capel 3, the 3, I don't know why. Maybe the 2 and the 1 have already been taken. But the important thing is that we stay connected. Besides all this, there's also my website. It's carolcapelportal.com. You go there and scroll down the bar. At the very end, there's a little space for you to put your email. Rest assured, I won't be filling you up with email market, these crap. I don't even use it just in case something happens and my channel disappears and I disappear from here. You can't find me anymore. We could communicate, understand? We could talk to each other. I don't want to lose you guys. This is one of the messages I must pass on. Another message is that this month of October is the birthday month and it's also the month of Halloween. I'm planning something cool for my birthday. Do you want me to record a vlog of it? I recorded a vlog last month. You guys really liked it and I want to know if you want me to record a vlog. Leave it below also that if you guys want, I'll record, okay? But it's for you guys to watch because when I post a vlog, nobody sees it. Look, let's make the commitment there. I'll take the chance. Let's go. The first proof of the existence of parallel dimensions is that some people, some archaeologists, ended up finding artifacts that do not exist in our civilization. Bizarre things. What are artifacts, Carol? They are old things that people used in the past and that sometimes an archaeologist ends up finding. For example, go there to do an excavation and find an Egyptian vase. Wow, it's worth, I don't know, €1 billion. It goes to the Louvre Museum, an artifact. But when we find an Egyptian or Sumerian or archaic artifact, we know which people that artifact came from. However, what if I tell you that there are artifacts found by archaeologists that do not belong to our civilization? For example, a hammer found in London in the 30s. This object that was found is dated back to over 500 million years ago, when civilization didn't even exist. There's also the mysterious Antikythera mechanism, which is a kind of computer found on a Greek island at a time when computers didn't even exist. And then there's a big dilemma. For example, there's a dilemma between whether time travel exists. In other words, did these people take things from the future and bring them to the past? Could they be things that came from other dimensions? In short, they are artifacts that do not belong to our civilization, found by our civilization. The second proof that dimensions exist for them is the case of Lerina Garcia. In July of 2008, a woman named Lerina Garcia, 41 years old, woke up in her bed as if she had woken up normally, as she does every day. Only she got out of bed and she began to notice in her routine of brushing her teeth, going through the living room, going to the bathroom, that some things were different, that some objects were in different places. She began to notice different things within her own life routine. For example, she went to sleep with a floral duvet and woke up with a striped blanket. The pillowcase was also different from when she had laid down. Anyway, she decided to put aside these small details and went to work at the company where she had been working for 20 years. When she arrived at her department, she noticed that the people who were there and that the department was not the same, that something was different and changed. Being aware that the situation was very strange and that something was wrong, she went back home and then she met a man she was married to. However, she had divorced 6 months ago. But now this separation, this divorce had never happened. In other words, her ex-husband, who is now also her current husband, made her realize that she had entered a parallel dimension. And then she started paying more attention to everything that was happening around her, and she discovered that all her relatives, father, mother, grandparents, neighbors, everyone she knew, had actually disappeared. And the only person she knew from her past life there, which was another dimension, was this ex-husband who was no longer an ex-husband. In short, her life was completely different. And then overnight, just as she went to another dimension, she came back to this dimension. She then sought out authorities and doctors to understand what had happened to her. Well, some people told her that she had a neurological disorder, but other people like parapsychologists, neurosurgeons, and people who work with regression hypnosis did regression on her and found out that she really lived these experiences. In short, all evidence suggests she crossed into a parallel dimension. Now imagine you wake up in the morning and everything you know is different. Oh, people, I want at least one day to know what the feeling is. Oh, it doesn't come back anymore, right? Well, if I appear different here, it's a Carol from another dimension. Well, if you were scared by the case of Lerina Garcia, you can hardly wait to know the case of the visitor from Taured. It's Taured. I don't know how to say this name. In July of 1954, the authorities at Tokyo Airport received a somewhat peculiar figure at immigration. Well, this guy, this so-called visitor from this city whose name I can't pronounce, he arrived at Tokyo Airport immigration with a passport issued by a country that doesn't exist. Is everything good for you? All good? Are you guys okay? I'm not anymore. Well, he got there and he spoke Japanese very well, very fluently. And then he explained to the authorities that he was from this so-called country of Taured and was going to visit Tokyo. People said that the country mentioned didn't exist. And then look at the madness. They took the map of the planet, the world map, opened it in front of him, and then he was shocked, he was stunned, he turned white, he started to turn white because he said, no, this is not the world map. They said to him like this, look, which country in the world are you from? Pointed out to me on the map. He pointed to a place like that, which is roughly near Andorra, which is close to Spain. And he said, this is Taured, people didn't want to go from here to Andorra. And he said, no, I came from here. He presented his passport, documents, and other paperwork. Well, then the authorities weren't really buying his story and decided to keep him detained right there in the airport, you know? Just like that movie, The Terminal, with Tom Hanks, where they said, no, son, you're not leaving because you're not well. And they put him in a little room there, right? Well, what happened is that overnight this guy just disappeared from inside that room. The authorities kind of detained him to see the next day what they were going to do with him, if they were going to deport him to I don't know where, because you can't deport to a place that never came, right? You're going to deport you to a place that doesn't exist. Well, they detained him there, and then he disappeared and was never seen again. And one of the airport security saw, nobody saw, and that's it, folks. The airport is such a safe place. How could this guy have disappeared? And, well, I think and I hope he found his way back home because, right, can you imagine, folks, getting lost in a dimension where... This story of this parallel dimension traveler was written in a book called The Directory of the Possibilities by author Colin Wilson. And then, many people thought it was like a fiction story, but no, this story was confirmed by the Japanese authorities. they confirmed that this truly occurred. So this is a real story. The next evidence that parallel dimensions exist. It's the famous déjà vu, and I'm not going to delve too much into this subject. Since I've made a full video on déjà vu, I'll leave the link here. And on the card, if you can't find it, it's here on my channel. It wasn't that long ago, it was at the end of August, so go watch it because it's complete, like seriously 100%. But déjà vu, it's like you remember a memory that you've already lived, and this memory is so vivid in your head that you really believe that it happened, but then after a few seconds, you become aware that it didn't happen because you haven't lived it yet. So how can this happen? Well, some people, some scientists, some researchers believe that déjà vu is proof of a parallel existence, because in a parallel existence that has already happened, and in fact you are just remembering, or you stitched your current existence with your parallel existence. Look how crazy. Watch the complete déjà vu video there. Evidence number 6 are paranormal activities. Paranormal activity, ghost, demon, spirit, devil, call it what you want. These ghosts, these spirits that people see around, believe it or not, but there are some parapsychologists, some scholars, some mediums who believe that the act, the fact, and everything that we see ghosts and that we see other creatures from other planets is because in fact we are seeing people in parallel dimensions. Not exactly that person is a ghost, but you are seeing that person because you are coming into contact with her dimension. And look at the madness to which point we have arrived in this story. People believe that the opposite also happens. That is, imagine that I am here, in this house, at this moment, in this dimension we live in. And then in a parallel dimension, there is another family living here in this house too. So every now and then I see this family here. Why? Because they are the ghosts that haunt me. But at the same time, they also see me as the ghost that haunts them, because I'm in a different dimension from them. So they believe that ghosts are nothing more than people living in parallel dimensions, and that every now and then we end up crossing these dimensions and seeing these people, and we believe it's a ghost, but actually, no, they are just in other dimensions. Wow, look, I got really confused, but you guys understood, right? The next one is the existence of the fifth dimension. Carol, the fifth dimension does not exist. Yes, it does. Have you guys watched that Interstellar movie by Christopher Nolan? The movie is sensational. If you haven't watched it, do so. It's normal if you didn't understand it. I had to watch it twice to come to a conclusion. Well, basically, it's a science fiction movie that isn't so fictional. I'm not going to tell the movie, obviously. I'm not going to give spoilers to you, but this movie basically proves that the fifth dimension is possible, and I tell you more. Well, in this movie, Matthew McConaughey, who is the main actor of the movie, he enters the fifth dimension, which he thought technically should be incomprehensible to the human mind, to human possibilities, but no. He manages to send a message to himself at another time in the third dimension. It's crazy. Well, theoretically, this wouldn't be possible because we live in a three-dimensional existence because of the vector distances we have, right? The XY axis, that's 3 dimensions. So for our conception, this doesn't exist, but for science, this is a very real possibility. So the existence of the fifth dimension proves the existence of parallel dimensions. And they even believe that the fourth dimension is the dimension that divides these 2 dimensions, our 3D world, that is, our third dimension from the fifth dimension. Carol, of all that you've said, is there anything that has scientific proof? Yes, many of the things I've talked about have scientific proof, but the most intriguing is the double-slit experiment. Well, according to quantum mechanics, which is a science that studies the interactions of particles at the subatomic level, that is smaller than the atom, we can get a good idea of how this universe works. By observing the behavior of photons and electrons, which are particles smaller than the atom. And believe it or not, but already it has been proven in the lab with scientific research that these subatomic particles, the electrons and photons, they behave in a way that they are in multiple realities at the same time. Basically, they are in several different locations, existing simultaneously in all these dimensions. Basically, speaking from experience, the electrons and photons, they exist in 2 different places at the same time. So there's a whole experience there that puts two vertical plates with a slit in the middle. And then when they throw the electron or the photon, this electron and this photon exist in two different places at the same time. That's the double-slit experiment in a nutshell. And this proves the possibility of subatomic particles being in two places at the same time, which proves the theory of parallel dimensions. Now, the last and most frightening of all, which was even replicated in a movie I watched, but I can't remember the name, but basically it's this: have you ever heard of European Organization for Nuclear Research, the particle accelerator in Switzerland? Well, this was built so that we could understand and discover what is beyond the atom, right? The subatomic particles. So they built a huge machine called the Hadron Collider, and inside this machine they tried, look how crazy, they tried to reproduce a black hole, they tried to create antimatter. Well, then they stopped. Why did they stop, Carol? Well, obviously because they ended up discovering the consequences of doing that. There was even a movie that did that. Well, the movie was basically like this. They were off Earth, just imagine how crazy, off Earth in a ship that had the Hadron Collider inside this ship. And they needed to create this experience. The same experience they created here on Earth, that they tried to create and then they stopped in time. They tried to create off Earth to be able to generate a type of renewable energy because Earth was running out of energy. And then what happened? They opened a hole in time and transported this in the movie, okay? They opened a hole in time and transported the Earth to a parallel dimension where bizarrely giant creatures existed, which ended life on Earth. And then inside the ship they created another reality. In this other reality, other people, other crew members existed, and then they had a reality shock. Two realities happened at the same moment. A lot of shit happened anyway. That was the movie I watched. Not even in this Hadron Collider that they have here in Switzerland. They tried to do basically the same thing, only they stopped halfway. And so thankfully, you know why they stopped halfway? Because they discovered what would happen if they had two realities happening at the same time. The chaos that would be anyway, built a business there worth billions and billions of dollars. Look, the business is a crazy thing, and then they stopped the process in the middle. Thankfully, they stopped. Well, but then because of these experiences with the Hadron Collider, they ended up discovering other things. Anyway, there are so many things that we little fools don't receive. The information doesn't reach us. Why? Because we are more worried about who is going to participate in the farm. We are more worried about the end of the relationship between Anita and Pedro Scooby. We are more worried about what Luana Piovani has to say about this. We are more worried. I could stay here until tomorrow. But anyway, that's exactly it. We are worried about other things. We are not worried about things that could really make a difference in our life. I brought here to show you some of the proofs that parallel realities exist. Sorry to have shocked you with some of them. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, leave a like here for nothing, because YouTube is going to end. Subscribe to the channel for nothing, because YouTube, besides ending, also took my verified badge from the channel. I'm no longer verified by YouTube. They backtracked. It's like a job you have, you should be promoted, and then they demote you, which is against the laws, because in the CLT you can't do that. But here anything goes, right? So that's it. Do all this for nothing, and I'll see you then in our next video. Thank you. Subtitle Adriana Zanotto.